The ArriveCAN scam. Is this going to be the thing to end this prime minister's career? Today I have joining me an anonymous man here, Cypher from Northern Perspective. You can find out about why he's anonymous. Go check out his channel. But today he's talking about ArriveCAN. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Clyde. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And I do want to recommend people go check the link in the description because you get into some of the details of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm talking like in depth. Some of your live streams go for what, 4 hours as you're diving into some of the in-depth what's been going on with this ArriveCAN app scam.
Yeah, we've actually created a playlist because there's been so much material. This started as a one video thing. It was on a Saturday. We figured, oh, this is taking up some time of some of the parliamentarians. So we said, all right, we better do a video on this. And the intent was to research this for a couple of hours. Put some context with some committee video and reference some of the Globe and Mail articles, wrap it up and call it a day. But as the research continued, it wouldn't stop. I felt like Neo in the Matrix being dragged down the rabbit hole. So 1 hour turned into 2, turned into 4, turned into 7, and turned into an entire Saturday. And that led to a 37-minute video by the end of it. And we were initially concerned about the length of it, but it was received very, very well. And the depth that we got into it and the facts that came out of that we think we even found some at the time that the mainstream media didn't even find, it blew this wide open and really gave us an insight as to the rot and the depth of corruption in this government.
Well, let's get into an overview of what's going on here. Now, this administration, this cabinet of Trudeau's is no stranger to ethics violations. They've been twice confirmed. What is it? They've twice violated ethics from the commissioner. We don't have a commissioner anymore, not for the time being anyway. But in the meantime, would say what?
There was one appointed. Yes.
We do have one now. Okay, well that's good to know.
Yes, after a whole bunch of shady stuff happened over the summer, then they decided, okay, now we can appoint one.
Oh, okay. Is he anybody's cousin? I don't. I'm afraid to ask.
No.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
Okay, good. So we have an ethics commissioner. This administration is no strangers to ethics violations. That being said, there's been so many scandals because of this government, and this is not to be confused with the new green slush fund one that gets into the billions of dollars. This one is just merely into the tens of millions of dollars. But
this is quote unquote small potatoes.
Yeah, but nonetheless, this is looking like it can be criminal, and it's getting to the point where now we have an RCMP investigation into this, and it's looking like there may be ties in as far as cabinet officials, MPs possibly in this whole thing. So how did we get from the beginning of people just going, why did it cost so much, to this all happening?
So it's a great question, and I'll try and keep it brief because the detail in this is just so vast. We did over 10 hours of live streams last week just on this. So for anyone who's interested, check out the playlist, and it's growing day by day. But essentially what started was there was a bunch of guys who worked at some staffing firms, and they worked at the same staffing firm from 2008 to 2010. And after that, they kind of went their separate ways. Some of them worked at another staffing firm together, and then eventually some of the other guys started a company because they wanted to make their own money. They saw the money that was in play for the government. So they started their own staffing firm called GC Strategies. You can speculate what GC stands for. I think it stands for Government of Canada Strategy, because their strategy just seems to be milking the government for every cent that they can. So GC Strategies started to work with the government back in 2015. And then another duo of companies, Coridex and Dalian, they've also been doing business with the government as far back as at least 2013. Now, What ended
And
up
I have some of the
happening,
stats here to
yeah, so you can
show
see it
this.
right here. So there's been a steady increase in contracting and professional services that the government has been spending on these three companies. Now, the thing to understand is the rabbit hole begins when you start to understand that Cortex and Dalian, they're two separate companies, but they operate out of the same building, in the same office, sharing the same staff. They even have the same fax number, for goodness sake. So they are intertwined, but they're legally separate companies. Now, Dalian has a grand total of 3 employees, the president, CEO, and 2 employees. One of those, which is the owner, is Indigenous, which qualifies them for the Indigenous procurement program for the government. So in larger contracts, governments need 2 different vendors in order to bid on the contract. So what this allows Dali and Cortex to do is both of them can apply for the contract. There's your 2. And if somebody wants to prefer those 2 vendors as, the people that they want to submit that contract to, then because they operate as one company, it doesn't matter who wins the contract. And if they're looking for an Indigenous procurement option, then Dalian's going to win it. So Dalian wins the contract with their 3 people, and then Cortex has but 40 or 50 people. They either do some of the work, but they don't really have that many IT staff, or they just contract it out. Now, how does this all lead to this ArriveCAN stuff? Well, Cortex and Dalian won a $22 million general IT services contract, meaning there's not one specific project. It's just there's $22 million worth of spend that the government can activate with them.
Mm-hmm.
So on comes Bill C-65, which is the anti-harassment legislation that the government put forward. And Cameron McDonald, who works for the CBSA at that point, the Canada Border Services Agency, decided that he wanted to exploit this. He wanted to call his buddy up who worked at GC Strategies that he's known for years and say, hey, see if you can find somebody to that we can work with on this. And he had heard of this company called Bottler AI, who had a lot of press about their anti-sexual harassment app that they have. So Christian Firth, who works for GC Strategies, goes and talks to Bottler AI, brings them on board with no contract, might I add. And what ends up happening is Cameron McDonald says, okay, I need some money for this. Well, we have this general services contract with Dalian and Cortex, which the government was allocating to build an app for customs. And he said, we'll just use that. Now, what should have happened is a competitive process because this is a new project. But he didn't want to do that. So he just said, no, I'm going to issue a task authorization, which basically means give me some of the Dalian money. And that's what happened. A contract was struck up with Dalian. And then what happened is Dalian took 20% of that. And then they subcontracted that down to GC Strategies. GC Strategies took 20% of that and then subcontracted that down to Bottler. This is where the whole problem
lies. No work had been done at this point yet.
Zero.
Nothing has been done. It's just been guys just juggling contracts. Now, if you look at the illustration here, you'll see 3 different companies, but you see a lot of the same people in these companies. And there's not a lot of people to begin with in these companies. It's a lot of, what would you call this? Embezzlement, just moving money around and not getting any work done.
Well, it's contract fraud, it's general fraud, there's resume fraud, there's extortion, all of these are potential charges of criminality that are coming out of this. And what you're seeing here is the common links between all of these guys before they ended up where they are now. So 3 of the guys in the bottom left quadrant there, they started GC Strategies. So you have Christian Firth, Darren Anthony, and you have Caleb White. And then the other guy is Colin Wood. Colin Wood ended up being the president of Cortex. And that's the organization that's subcontracted down to GC Strategies, which is where those other 3 guys are. Mm-hmm. So when these guys are all in front of committee trying to explain how they built a $54 million app and are lying through their teeth and saying, oh, this provided great value to Canadians, they're not mentioning the fact that they've known each other for 15 years. They've completely negated that fact. And when they were asked, well, how often do you do business with GC Strategies? Well, Colin Wood said, we occasionally do business. Christian First said, we've only done business the one time. Well, occasionally means more than once. So who's telling the truth here? It's a problem. So all of this came to light when Bottler, as they were working through this mess, they were seeing all of these problems going on. They operated for over a year, over 2 years, without a contract directly with the government and without a contract directly to GC Strategies. So they decided to do the prudent thing and raise all of these allegations of misconduct to the government. And the government, well, they basically said, well, we're not interested in that. And you need to be quiet and work with these agencies. If you don't, your contract is terminated. So you're looking at extortion at that in that way. So they're basically being told, ignore all the corruption and misconduct going on, do your jobs, and everyone will be fine. And when they chose not to do that, well, that's where we're at in our series when we're exposing this stuff. So, but it's two courageous individuals, Ritika Dutt and Amir Morv. They blew the whistle on this. They did so through a Globe and Mail article just this past fall, where they announced that an RCMP investigation was going on. The Globe and Mail dropped all of this evidence, and that exploded in government committee. And now there's a full-fledged government investigation, and that's where the Conservatives are spending a lot of their time. And what is happening is this little project, this tiny little pilot that they were doing, is blowing up. And now it's involving deputy ministers, assistant deputy ministers. Cabinet is being implicated in this. Marco Mendocino has already been implicated in this as wanting somebody's head to roll when ArriveCAN started blowing up over a year ago. So there's a lot of ties to this government. And why this is so big is because what is indicated here is this is not an isolated incident to ArriveCAN. It's not an isolated incident to this Bottler project. What it's indicating is that there's far more contractors that this is going on with. So you think about it. If you are pulling a plumber into your house, you would like to actually be prudent with your money. If that plumber said, oh, yeah, sure, I'm not going to do the work, but what I'll do is I'll subcontract that out to another plumber. How about that? But I'm going to take 20%. You're going to say, piss off. How about I just talk to that guy directly and then I don't have to pay you 20% more? How about that? That's what you're going to say to the guy. But the government doesn't do that. The government knowingly has these processes where they go out to a contractor and they say, I need work done for ArriveCAN. And they'll say, sure, no problem. They will literally do no work, take 20 to 30% of the total contract fee, put that in their pocket, and then give that to somebody else. And then they will do the same thing. They will take 20 to 30% of what's left of that contract, put it in their pocket, and give it to somebody else. And then they may actually start doing the work with whoever is the lucky schmuck that actually gets the real work of the contract for this.
Meanwhile, the taxpayer is on the hook for all of this.
Absolutely. And yet the government is turning around and saying, no, we find that the ArriveCAN contract delivered fair value to Canadians. And what they're trying to justify is that it used to cost $3 per sheet of paper at the border when people were coming in off of a flight. And ArriveCAN has made that a lot cheaper. Well, I'm sorry, but just because $54 million is cheaper than your $3 per form doesn't mean that you shouldn't have built this for $250,000 and saved over $53 million of taxpayer money and put it to some other program.
Well, this is absolutely frustrating. And I mean, there's so many details to this. And this is why I brought you on, because you have shed so much light on this whole story as a whole. Now, to quick summary, the government surprise, surprise, has been doing things in an inefficient way, but has been lining the pockets of people, special interests, and are actually getting caught this time. So I want to encourage everybody to go over to Northern's Perspectives channel, check out that playlist. Again, links in the description down below, and we can shed light on this whole situation, because, and I really want to thank you, Cypher and Fox of Northern Perspective, for putting so much time into this, because the public needs to know, and there's not enough people out there telling this story.
It's a real pleasure to be on here talking about this, and the best thing that we can ask people to do is watch the videos, get yourself informed. We do give our own opinion on it, but most of what you're going to hear is facts, and it's emails that have been released to the public as part of the disclosure of the Bottler whistleblowers to committee. It's what committee is getting, and share the videos, because this is what the average person in Canada is not hearing about. You are not hearing about this in CBC. You're not hearing about this in CTV, National Post, like anything. The Globe and Mail has been the only ones that have actually had the guts to report on this, but that news cycle is starting to dry up for them. So we have to keep it going, and this is only going to get deeper and deeper as we fall down the rabbit hole.
Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.